Good evening and welcome to Law Talk, the show that brings you the law, the Constitution, and the events of today to each of you each month. Myself, James Barrett, with Mark Malachowski are here tonight to cover 3 exciting subjects. But before we get going on our subjects for tonight, I'd like to say one thing. This is September 11th, and our country in 2001 was attacked by Islamic extremists. Now, 18 years later, we still celebrate in memorial that day. And I wanted to bring this up with Mark, and I wanted you to understand that this is a very, very solemn event each year. And from both of us at Law Talk, I wanted to say that thank you for believing in this nation. So, Mark, what are your subjects tonight?
Okay, well, first we have the Epstein estate, and that's Jeffrey Epstein wrote a will shortly before he committed suicide, apparently. And then we also have kind of a world-shaking event in Hong Kong. And, there's the whole thing between Red China and Hong Kong about the 47 or 50 years that they were supposed to be kind of side by side and not combined completely. And so there's a battle over that. And then we're going to go to the border walls funded with some military funding. And so the Defense Secretary, Esper, agreed to free up $3.6 billion. So that's our 3 subjects.
Okay, so why don't we start with Epstein, because it's a very controversial figure. And he mysteriously died in a jail cell. Funny enough, with no cameras operating.
No guards.
No guards, no cameras. And by the way, it's just another day in the New York jail system.
And there's actually nothing you can hang yourself
on. Oh, there's nothing you can really hang
years.
yourself on, except maybe a bad will. But
so he wrote a will. He wrote a will. There's $600 million.
Oh, is that it?
And people, he did a lot of offshore accounts and tax avoidance kind of thing. So people think there's more than that. He's got a brother, but since he's not intestate, we don't know who's in the will. It'll be interesting to see who's actually he's leaving the money to.
Well, actually, Mark, I do know that it's his brother that's getting all of his estate. Oh, yeah. And what's interesting about Jeffrey, he wasn't really a philanthropist. His philanthropy involved things outside of the arts and the homeless.
Kind of like the Swedish art film.
Yeah, he was a Swedish art philanthropist, where his art all dealt with women and, the look and by the way, underaged women. And unfortunately, when you got $600 million, you're going to pretty much do what you want. So, Mark, tell me about Mr. Epstein and what a great career he must have had.
Well, Epstein's pretty an interesting fellow. He was never known to be the brightest or the sharpest tool in the book, right? Never really that good on anything. And then he kind of just like he mysteriously, well, actually, it's no mystery. No one really believes the suicide for 3 seconds. But, whatever you want to call it. But he was rich. He had a lot of money. And so how did he do that? The theory is that there was a lady now, I think it was Ghislaine Maxwell, and her father was Robert Maxwell, which is famous Mossad agent. Netanyahu said he's the best spy we ever had. We ever had. He was also a big producer and publisher, very rich guy, very influential on information, propaganda, whatever you want to call it. Very, very influential, powerful person. Now, his daughter, in this case, it seems like she ran Epstein, and Epstein was kind of more or less a stooge. And his job was to recruit young girls and then get the rich and famous, mainly the royal and famous, or presidents and princes and famous people like that, get them in compromising positions, and then have some blackmail for them, and then that all worked out for the Mossad information.
Well, what's interesting about this is that Jeffrey actually, he started as a school teacher at a private school. And funny enough, one of the clients that brought their children in was related to the owner of a company named L Brands, which is a multi-billion-dollar company. And Jeffrey, for some reason, was promoted from bum the school teacher to private investment
banker. Wasn't there something like Megacore or something like that?
Yeah, well, there's multiple. See, it's interesting. There was multiple billionaires that seemed to rely on Jeffrey.
Well, basically, he had a lot of front corporations.
He had a lot of people to get money. In fact, the gentleman from L Brands actually indicated post his death that Jeffrey had somehow come into the possession of hundreds of millions of his dollars unofficially. And so there's a chance there's going to be some post-death lawsuits involving investors where Jeffrey was supposed to be handling their money. But what's interesting here is you wonder what kind of interest Jeffrey was really paying.
No, but the question is these people, I mean, now are these people who invested in Jeffrey saying they didn't get their money's worth? Because I think they got something.
They must have got, something. I think it's always part of the Lolita Express to the Virgin Islands.
They got entertainment.
They were entertained. But by the way, is that interest on your dollar to be entertained?
Well, maybe that's what they got for their money. But anyway, what's interesting about this is that, according to like retired CIA guys, back in the 70s, the CIA did do some hits or assassinations of American citizens. They got in a lot of trouble for that, right? And so they kind of put the nix on that. The CIA is really only supposed to be doing stuff overseas, spying overseas, doing assassinations overseas. So then you've got the dicey problems. Well, who's going to do the assassinations that need to be done in the United States? Well, that typically, if you look at the Clintons who were hooked up with Epstein and who helped them run their cocaine smuggling empire out of
Mena, Arkansas.
The security
with Bill's stepbrother, or half-brother.
Yeah, Bill's brother. And so the security for that was Mossad. And so Mossad can do hits in USA. Now, I don't know if the CIA does a favor and does some in Israel that they can't do, but I'm sure there's some kind of,
quid pro quo,
tit for tat. But what's interesting about what really gets into, so Epstein gets nicked and he gets arrested in Florida, in Palm Beach. And what's interesting about that is that, of course, Palm Beach, highly decorated detective Joseph, I think it's Ricori, right in the middle of this thing, and he's the one who went to the DA. The DA wouldn't take it. He took it. He went up to the AG. He went to the, he went to the feds. He pushed this thing and pushed this thing. Everyone was saying, no, leave it alone, leave it alone. But this guy was a highly decorated detective. So then once the things got rolling, he dies after a short illness at 50, which is another word for poisoning.
Oh,
okay,
yes.
So
of course.
So the guy who pushed this whole thing again said, had a little premature death, I guess you would call it. And so then it goes to the guy, and this gets into a little politics here. You've got Labor Secretary Alexander Acosta, right? He's in the Trump administration. And this may be what happens. This is a little speculations, but the Democrats are like, well, we can embarrass Trump, right? Epstein got let off by Alexander Acosta, and also Epstein was at Mar-a-Lago, and so we can tie, Trump into pedophilia.
Trump.
Yeah, and so they go after Alexander, and Alexander just goes, hey, my buddies called me on the other side and said this is out of my pay grade. In other words, this is a spook operation. It's MI6, or it's Mossad, or it's CIA. But when you get that phone call and you're in the FBI and you're domestic, you're like, okay, hands up.
It's up to you guys.
Yeah,
it's up to you guys.
And
not my game anymore.
And you know who told him that? Probably told him that? Ken Starr. And what's interesting about Ken Starr, Acosta used to work in the law firm with Ken Starr. Oh. And so when Epstein got busted in Florida, he hired Ken Starr's law firm.
You know who else he hired? Alan Dershowitz.
Yeah, but
there's a whole gang of the top guys.
No,
they're in the middle of it.
But Acosta used to work at that firm. So his buddies from his old firm call him and go, yeah, it's kind of over your pay grade. You really don't want a suicide. And so he's like, okay. So this guy gets off with community service or whatever. And that's where...
What's funny, okay, there's one part of this. He was supposed to wear the bracelet, never wore the bracelet, was supposed to be at home, was at home.
He was wearing a tennis bracelet. I think it was the only bracelet he wore.
And you know what? That was the tennis bracelet on his private jet as he flew to Europe.
There's some jokes I can't tell. But anyway, he gets off on that. He skates on that. But then this next thing comes up, with Acosta, and so they go, okay, we're going to bring it back in because we're trying to embarrass Trump. Well, then they get him, and they find out, wait a minute, there's all this spook stuff, and we really can't have that blown open.
Well, hang on. I think this is a really deep subject. I think what we ought to do is start with the spook stuff next time we cover Jeffrey. And what's our second subject for tonight, Mark?
Well, this is really a world-shaking...
Are you shaking on this
one?
A
world-shaking event. No, that's what's her name? Merkel's the one's always doing the shaking.
She's always shaking.
Yeah, because of the snacks she has.
That's allegedly.
The Epstein tidbits. Okay, well anyway, what is that? The Karoo. Anyway, so the Karoo. So Hong Kong was promised 50 years of no change and more freedoms than mainland China.
Can I give a little bit of background on this?
I think you should.
What happened? As we all know, that the British government did a deal with China back in 1897, and they said, oh, okay, we'll give you back Hong Kong after we've totally built it, developed it, and do everything, but we're not going to do it for 100 years. Now, the British thought that was a long time, but no. China said, it's only 100 years. And China's been around thousands of years. So when you talk about 100 years to them, it's been a bit of rice in the rice cup. So we got to 1997, but guess what? It was supposed to be one country,
two systems.
Two systems,
right.
Which meant Hong Kong for 50 more years was supposed to be free, capitalistic, and not overblown and taken over by China's policies, including no military on every street corner, including no military running the government, no dictatorship, and it's supposed to be free.
So it wasn't supposed to be communist, right?
It wasn't supposed to be communist.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be a free capitalistic society for 50 years. Now, that deal's bad on itself because 50 years is going to come up in about another 20 years. But what's the problem is, because of the issues, and this started with Taiwan, because there was a murder of Taiwan with 2 Hong Kong residents that went to Taiwan for a vacation. Now, this is really interesting. You wonder why one husband killing his wife created all of this intrigue.
Subject matter jurisdiction problem.
Yeah,
basically SMJ.
But there's no extradition treaty with Taiwan.
Right.
So they were saying, well, now if we have a problem like this, like a Hong Kong resident that's out of the country, we're going to have to say all those people can be shipped back to China for prosecution.
Well, we can't extradite people from France either. So
that's the whole point.
So what do we do about France? We have to
we have to let them go, like Roman Polanski. Speaking of Epstein, I'm sorry, but Roman Polanski is right on the hit parade. He started it all.
It's all in the family.
After Rosemary's Baby, it was Rosemary's Daughter. But anyway, so go ahead.
So anyway, what happened here, I think, is that China really didn't want to, like the red Chinese are communists, but they like to be rich communists just for themselves, not for the people. But,
not for the people.
And what they used to do is always go to Macau. Like the leaders of red China would go to Macau. They'd gamble and drink their cognac and have their women, prostitutes and one thing or another. But they didn't do it back home because they were supposed to be
family men.
Well, no, they're supposed to. No, they're supposed to have their little Mao coat, little cap, and eating rice and not using toilet paper and all the things that make a good communist.
All you need is one rock.
One rock, yeah, one rock. No, I'm
one
serious.
Rock policy.
I'm serious. They didn't use toilet paper because cleanliness is good as godliness. Godliness is bad because we're communists. So no cleanliness. So you don't want to shake any left hands. But anyway, the point is, that's true. And if also the streets or sewers and the chickens and everything that's where you get all the flus.
Yeah, it's really tasty over there.
But anyway, but the point of the matter is, not only that, the fertilizer that's in the rice paddies is
pretty much feces.
Yeah, it's like, it's your own. So anyway, the point is you drop a pack of cigarettes, you don't want to pick it up. Put it that way. So my point being, that was the case, because Mao killed 60 million out of 100 million people, which basically means he killed anybody who could read and write. He killed all the Christians, anyone who believed in religion. He killed anybody pretty much who had a mustache or a beard. He killed most of the men. And
that's to get rid of the Fu Manchu concept.
Yeah, right. And so, that really set China back a long time because the Cultural Revolution was 1950. That's not that long ago. To eliminate a third of your population because they don't want to sing "We Are the World," and so. Or "We Are the Communist World," or whatever Mao wanted them to sing. They had to
Dancing with Flowers.
Yeah, they sing these little songs, right? And so if you didn't sing loud enough, it was like,
hey, you're gone.
Well, no.
Or you got shipped to the...
They'd ship you out to the fields, right? Yeah. And then they'd work you to death. And then after you confessed and turned in your relatives, then what they would do is usually break your kneecaps until everyone in your family too told them where the jade was buried, because this communist, that's how the communists got rich, because everyone had jade buried in their farm somewhere, so they just bust kneecaps until they got that jade. So that's what made them rich. There was a lot of jade, and that all got.
Well, anyway, let's go back to Hong Kong.
No, but here's the deal. Okay, so this was kind of a backwards country, and so they saw Hong Kong as a way to get cash, right? And also so they could go party in Macau. But now China is, since they robbed the United States of about $20 trillion, because our politicians were all bribed. Like the
our politicians were all bribed. It goes back a long way.
Well, about 20, 30 years. And so basically they took about $20 trillion off us, right? And they rebuilt their country. Now they've got Gunchow. They've got industrial areas that rival Hong Kong. Now they really don't need Hong Kong that badly. They've got their own financial powerhouse.
Yeah, but they
cities.
want Hong Kong because it still has the effect in the world of being a jewel.
Well,
it's a jewel.
That's true, but they're not in the. Before, Hong Kong had a much stronger bargaining position. Now that you've got 2 or 3 cities in China that are robust manufacturing and financial centers, they can be a little tougher on Hong Kong. That's what I think.
Well, that's what they're really doing. Well, they elected the woman, I believe her name is Lam, who is now the president of Hong Kong. But she's the one that put forth the extradition law.
Right.
And it was supposed to be a very narrowly tailored law aiming at the concept mostly about Taiwan.
Right.
And instead of leaving it specifically about Taiwan, she made it so broad that the people that have experienced freedom so long in Hong Kong said, this is supposed to be Hong Kong, supposed to be free, and we're supposed to be able to have free elections and all of that. And the people...
But no extradition to China is what they have.
Yeah, but it's supposed to be the one country, 2 systems, okay?
Right.
Hong Kong was supposed to be the other system no matter what for 50 years. As a result of this law, all they saw was the eroding of the freedoms that they had. And now, where'd that lead? But nothing but protests. And the protests have been nonstop for, 2 months? About 2 months.
There's been a lot of people. When they protest, there's 1 million people. Or
there's a million people protesting.
It's a lot of people
And they're breaking into government centers. They're breaking into police stations. They're spray painting pro-democracy graffiti.
They're singing the Star Spangled Banner.
They're singing the Star Spangled Banner.
A little bit out of key, but that's a hard song.
Yeah, well, the hard key.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that I think what we need to do tonight is just to introduce our audience to the concept that this is a growing issue. This is not going away. The freedoms in Hong Kong will continue to fester until I think there's going to be a military crackdown. But
okay, so October 1st or something is a big red Chinese day.
Yeah, the big day.
Right. And
okay.
So what's interesting about this is, like, we had communist China was backwards because they killed 60 million people. And now Hong Kong's trying to bring it out of those backward things where people are actually walking around in human feces.
Well, now
now you've got San Francisco being run by communists, and people are actually walking around in human feces all day long.
Let's move on to our third subject. Leave feces in the streets of San Francisco to another night. So what's our third subject?
It's there every day at night.
I know it is.
Okay, so here's an interesting one. Okay, so the border wall is funded. Okay, Defense Secretary Mark T. Esper agreed, to free up $3.6 billion from the Pentagon budget for the southern border wall.
Okay, now what we're talking about is following the Democratic legislation not passed because the Republicans don't control that House. The House of Representatives. The president found himself limited. So, because the president has absolute power to shift the use of monies, even if it's been allocated for a different purpose, if they can make it justifiable. Well, let me give you an update. The Supreme Court has said, as of today, said he can spend the money from the Pentagon on the border wall. And there's one other thing. The Supreme Court, as of last night, said that the asylum seekers cannot seek asylum. So now let's talk about how those two work together.
Okay, well, let's go back, first of all, to it's 10 U.S.C. Section 2808A that allows the executive to redirect Defense Department construction funds. This has been cleared by the court. Now, the asylum thing, because I think we have a California judge who's always making this, stopping the whole country.
Yeah, Judge Tiger.
Tiger.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but
No, it's Tiger.
Tiger. And so now I think they said, well, that counts for California and a couple other states.
No, Arizona.
Yeah,
no,
a couple
but
of.
the Supreme Court
But it doesn't count for
overruled him.
Oh, that's overruled now.
That was overruled last night at midnight.
I didn't know
by
that.
the Supreme Court.
Oh, okay.
In fact, Judge Tiger is going. You know what? In San Francisco, we have the basis for all the resistance in the federal court system. Fortunately,
well, that's
President Trump
I think if you walk down the street in San Francisco, it's knee-deep resistance. It's neat, and it smells.
And you gotta have deep boots on,
and it smells
and
bad.
the worst part is those boots better be able to stay away from syringes well,
Yeah,
because
right.
of syringes and feces. But anyway, so now the Supreme Court, as of last night,
The
said
smell of
that
confidence.
they said no asylum seekers in any state.
Oh, wow, I
And
didn't know that.
No, it just happened. And then today was that he can use the money from the Pentagon to build the wall.
Right.
Now, think about what that means. You mean we can control the border a little bit?
Well, you've got to understand, okay, we've got $1 trillion worth of heroin coming over the southern border. That comes out of Afghanistan, pretty much goes through Ukraine, comes up through Mexico, gets laundered where I don't want to talk about.
And everything
well, the money gets laundered in Israel, it gets sent back in diamonds, and that bribes everybody. That's $1 trillion. That's a big business. So Schumer, Soros, Schiff, all these guys, they've got oodles and oodles of money on this heroin deal. And there's also methamphetamine and the fentanyl coming across.
Well, the
right?
fentanyl now is the big one.
But also some of the fentanyl comes from China, so it's a little more confusing.
Well, no, China ships it to Mexico,
Yeah, right.
and they cut it in the heroin, and
Right.
they ship it north.
Right. And so what happens is that's $1 trillion. So that basically runs the Democratic Party. And that $1 trillion is a lot of money because it's not taxed, it's not counted. And, you know, and don't tell me that $1 trillion worth of heroin, methamphetamine, and fentanyl comes into this country, probably maybe $1.5 trillion. And no senator knows about it, and none of the border guards know about it.
Nobody knows about it.
And nobody knows about it.
Nobody knows
And this
about it.
$1 trillion.
$1 trillion.
Oh my gosh, you know.
Only $1 trillion.
You know, if you sell a candy bar, if you sell a cigarette on the street and you didn't pay the cigarette tax, you can get your head busted open.
That's right.
But
You're going to jail, buddy.
But $1 trillion of the heroin comes like, oh my
What
God.
the hell?
Whoa.
It's only $1 trillion.
I'm Charles Schumer. Where did I get that $1 trillion? I don't know. We're so cute. So these guys are nothing but heroin dealers, and they need to have that border open, right? And if you close that border,
That's why. There we go.
you know, you can still sneak like Learjets behind a regular jet, right?
Yeah.
But right now they're bringing caravans and cargo vans of this stuff. Tons of this stuff.
Tons.
And you know, this is their fun money.
This is their cash cow.
This is what makes it. This is what they do for a living.
And here's the other part of
but
that.
if you look at the Schumers and the Schiffs and the Soroses, they didn't just start doing this yesterday. They're the same crime family that did this in the opium wars in China with the Turkish heroin. These guys have been running heroin
Wait a
for
minute.
centuries.
Nancy Pelosi's father was involved with Lucky Luciano.
And these guys have been.
Give me a break.
These guys are smack dealers back centuries, and they're good at it, and they don't get caught. And if they've got to keep the border open to do it, they're going to keep it open.
You don't forget the border. What it really means. The border is votes and money.
Right.
So why are they fighting the wall? You know what I hear? Oh, the wall's archaic. What is this going to be like, China? Well, China's wall kept out the Mongols, kept everyone out. So yes, the wall works.
Well,
the wall works in Africa. The wall works in Israel. Why can't the wall work here?
Well, what you have, because if they cut off the heroin dealing, you're cutting off the globalist Democrat syndicate's base cash cow. And so now they're resorting to open intimidation, right? To keep any of this truth from collapsing their house of cards.
But
it is a house of cards.
The truth.
Okay, and what Trump is doing, he's trying to restore what you would call civic nationalism, okay? We have blacks, we have Hispanics, we have gays, we have straights, we have all kinds of different tribal groups in the United States. But as long as you're in this border, right, we're saying you're all an American. We should all say the Pledge of Allegiance. Whoever wins the election, even if you hate his guts, you follow him because we're all American.
Right, you're supposed to.
Okay, but the globalists don't want that.
They don't want that at all.
The globalists want each one of these, they want the balkanization of each one of these tribes. And so, in other words, they want the blacks fighting the whites, fighting the Hispanics.
And they want the Asians fighting the blacks.
Yeah, right. And the Muslims fighting the Christians, right.
And Yeah, that's easier to control.
So the globalists want that, and if they're not doing it with the United States, they're also doing it with the countries. They're saying, oh, we want the Christians to invade the Muslims.
Oh, boy.
We want these guys to be, the Chinese to be invaded. So they're always starting a war. Now, with Bolton leaving, I think the chance of having a war, I think that's a great thing, because I think Bolton did the Iraq war. He was trying to do a Syria war, wanted to do an Iran war. He tried to get in a war with North Korea. So these guys are always trying to get a war with someone. But the point of the matter is, civic nationalism is the glue that holds a multicultural, even though we are multicultural, instead of being warring tribes against each other, this is the glue that holds the nation together.
Hold us together.
Well, but the thing is, the whole globalism has been fracturing that and trying to set people against each other. And so,
well, of course, that goes with the whole concept of destroying the education system in the country, so that the people they don't understand history.
They're identifying as we are the world, we're citizens of the world, but they're not identifying as American citizens.
No, not as American citizens.
And if people aren't identifying as American citizens, the glue that holds our culture together is going to be, and what is going to happen? It's not going to go to globalists, because the globalists are collapsing. What it's going to go to would be balkanized ethnic tribes warring with each other. So we have 2 or 3 states. We might have 15 ethnic tribal states in the United States fighting each other all the time.
Well, that's what's happening, like in Minnesota and all. Where you've got it started. Well, it's interesting how President Obama decided to bring in hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Another reason.
And that's part of the globalization.
But that's another thing of the open borders. They want to bring in diverse ethnic tribes that don't want to assimilate, that don't consider themselves American, and that will destroy the United States. And the reason the globalists want to destroy the United States, because we're the only ones they're really worried about. They know that the red Chinese do what they're told, because they've been doing what they're told ever since they killed everybody that could grow a beard in 1950. Because all the people who would resist. The Russians, they raped and killed 82 million people, right? So anybody who wouldn't sit there and watch their wife get raped and protest, you get your head shot off. So that got rid of all those guys. Well, it was basically Lev Davidson Borenstein and Jacob Schiff from New York, a couple of New Yorkers. But Stalin worked for him, but he was like he's
a well-paid student.
Nah, he was basically like the guy who parks the cars. He wasn't one of the elite, and he wasn't a Checa. But the point of the matter is, those populations have been pretty much anybody who would fight has been wiped out. The Europeans, we had the Soviet Union, that broke up. Nationalism, Poles, Hungarians broke off from the Soviet Union. There was some nationalism there. So the next stage was
Well, anyway, I think we're going to wrap it for tonight on that, Mark. That is a different subject that we have to get into. Hey, I want to thank everyone for joining us for Law Talk tonight. We'll see you next month. Have a wonderful evening.
Okay.
So, by the way, Mark, that was good about you talked about that Stalin thing before.
But